Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
Happy holiday everyone, and welcome back to yet another day in New World MMO. This morning we finally received our second developer diary for the game, and this one was tailored more towards finding out a bit more about who we're going to be fighting in the world of Aeternum. I'm sure many of you like myself were expecting a longer video to come from this since the delays happened. It looks like one of the community managers has stepped in to give us a bit more insight as to what the reason might be. Or at least in this case, what was not the reason for them having to delay the diary. Today on one of the community discords, the Germany-based community manager for Amazon Game Studios named Tosh had told us that the translation specifically was not the reason for the delay as we all had thought. It appears that something else entirely was the cause of this. Could be related to reshooting footage or audio failures, but we have no way of knowing currently. Nevertheless, let's go ahead and dive into this diary that talks about fighting the New World. Jumping straight into what we know so far, the diary starts off with both senior level designer Kim Wood and lead UX designer Dan Hinneber as they give us another brief introduction to the world of Aeternum. They state that in the world of Aeternum, when we first arrive we'll be at Ground Zero. Our ships have crashed, which totally explains why we won't be getting ship travel anytime soon, and after we set landfall we will meet others out in the world that we can either band together with, fight against, or die alone without. And of course this part is tailored toward the player versus environment side of the game. When it comes to the player versus player, that'll be a different story altogether. In these next scenes we get a closer look into the game's world with some places we haven't seen before. That also includes what looks to be an undead camp of the lost, one of the entities of Aeternum that seem to be found mainly near shipwrecks that take up the form of a ghoul-like creature. We then get a couple snapshots of the territory owned by the Ancients, while the UX designer Hain Lee describes the life or death system of Aeternum, and that we will quickly realize that nothing really ever dies on the island, that no soul can leave the body, and the cause of this is the powerful resource that grants immortality that is called Azoth. Now this is a part that I really wanted to touch on because I do find it to be an interesting concept, even though I could understand how it could be confusing at first. Basically what she is saying is that when you get to Aeternum, like we learned about before, your body and your presence becomes attached to it. The Azoth that runs through the land influences not only us as people, but the world around it. Sometimes this can be for good, and sometimes this can be for bad. For example, as they mention later, there are 4 different factions mentioned in this brief dev diary that make up the ecosystem of the island. First we have the Corrupted, and next we have the Lost, the Angry Earth, and the Ancients. For the Corrupted, they are the exact definition of what starts to happen when the dark side of Aeternum begins to take hold within us, corrupting our darkest deeds to overtake the rest of our energy to become beings of pure hatred and darkness. Through time and time again, they hint at the corruption being tied to the promise of power or our deepest desires. The Corrupted is what happens when that sort of thing becomes reality. And then on the opposite side of that, you have the Lost. Not the Ancients, but the Lost. And the reason I say this is because as we know, and this is something that I want to reiterate on, the Ancients of Aeternum are all gone. They are long dead and we aren't exactly sure what happened to them, but I bet every penny in my closet that the Corrupted had something to do with it. What's left of the Ancients are known as Guardians. Those are the skeletons and skeletal-like creatures you've been seeing with the fancy headwear. These entities are 100% more dangerous than the Lost, as they are able to wield secrets of the Ancients as we've seen in the teasers before. And on top of that, as opposed to the Lost who just represent zombies or ghouls, the Ancients have a different look than them altogether. And these Guardians are, as I would guess, probably made up of all the ancient civilization's dead bodies. So whatever power or experience they had before this, they might have just kept some pieces of it. Now getting back to the Lost, we haven't had a lot of information on who they are or what they are outside of this video. But I believe their name spells out exactly where they come from. I believe that the Lost are us, and that we are the Lost when we die. Because think about it. These souls only seem to live near shipwrecks, or near the shoreline or other outer areas of the island, and they even talk about this during the video by stating that the Lost are the soulless wretches of the game. They are people that have eternal life but without a soul. They state that to become a Lost, you will have had to die in some horrific way or been a sailor that had crash landed on the land and washed ashore. But let's be honest, the only type of death that we're going to be getting in game as the players is the horrific kind. So that then begs the question of what happens to our souls when we die. Well, as Hain Lee has previously said, when we die, no soul can leave the body. It is the magical resource that grants the power of immortality, so therefore our soul might then be transferred back into the land to become Azoth, which does also make me wonder, are we being sent here by someone or something on purpose to basically become power generators for this island whether we like it or not? Questions for another time, I'm sure. And then past that, we lastly have the natural order of the Angry Earth itself, which is one that I'm glad we're finally having the opportunity to dive into. Starting in this section, we get a look at a different type of what I can only imagine to be an Azoth-imbued resource that takes more of a nature-based appearance as opposed to the corrupted or blue glow like we've seen in the past. They describe the Angry Earth as the pure natural power of the island fighting back against the people who have come to corrupt it, and that it will do whatever it can to expel the invaders. We start to see different types of creatures from the Angry Earth, including the Spriggan warriors, the bowmen, possibly shamans, and even the animals like this one, which are considered the other type of guardians of Aeternum. But this one I have no idea what to call, because not only do they take the form of those animals, but also monstrosities that we may or may not have seen all of yet. But I can only imagine that this one, that we saw before, might be one of those. But ultimately with this dev diary, I had a feeling that it would open up more questions than answers, because now I'm thinking, why are the Angry Earth trying to fight against us if it's our souls themselves that fuel the land and become Azoth when we die? Unless everything was hunky-dory until somewhere along the lines those menacing corrupted showed up and crashed the party. And that's when I believe the ancients somehow went extinct, as I talked about in my videos relating to the New World story. I feel like either this story makes perfect sense and we just don't have all the pieces yet, or it could be that the story in actuality makes no sense and we're just starting to peel it back too hard. Either way, eventually we're going to learn what happens. Right after we get a brief explanation and showcase of what looks to be like the corrupted breaches, and how the corrupted themselves will fight against us and invade against us from David Verfaeli, the player experience lead for AGS, alongside Dan Hunebar, we get a much needed look on the absolute chaos of Territory Wars. Even though the showcase only lasts a total of like 10 seconds, we get to take a look into a bit of how the combat system and the 50v50 sieges may work. This is the part right here they could have extended to 3 to 5 minutes alone, and I'm sure everyone would have been more than fine with it. I really hope that the next dev blog or dev diary does focus specifically on or include the combat aspect of the game. Or even better, if we could just get a 6 to 10 minute gameplay video of the siege system or combat system alone, that's going to be all we need. But this current one starts off with the utter carnage being unleashed in the middle of a courtyard, with people dodging and rolling all over the place with bullets flying everywhere. And on the left side we get a look at someone using a triple fire ricochet bow skill to blast on an enemy, which tells us that combat skills or abilities for weapons has to be a thing. And on the right they seem to be defending or assaulting a capture point in the fortress. The flag appears to be resembling their company emblem from what I can see, since the faction symbols that we have seen do not take the shape of a bow. And a few brief points during this we also see what appears to be magically imbued weapons, some wielding darkness or even an ethereal light, as shown by this awesome looking crusader who looks like he's about to get dunked on. We also do get a very quick look at siege engine fire as well as building damage while the palisade burns. I did really enjoy the dev diary despite it being pretty short, but I totally understand where people are coming from that want a longer showcase of the combat. I would love to see something like that too before launch or beta if possible. But either way, that stuff is right around the corner, so we'll see what happens. By the way, if you haven't signed up already, they just opened up the closed alpha testing for New World, so be sure to check out the website to sign up through your Amazon account. The invites are going out randomly and in weekly increments from what the community is saying, and even if you were a part of the group of us that was in the alpha last year, the invites are completely random, so you might not be guaranteed access to this one. Oh, and one other thing for those of you who have not been following their job listings, it looks like Amazon Game Studios may have successfully filled or removed the positions for the following roles: environmental artist, AI character designer, and of course, the quest designer. If those positions were filled and not removed, we may see more interaction for questing later on down the line, or maybe even during the launch phase of the game. And with that folks, that'll be all the news that we have currently. Let me know what you thought about the dev diary and what you'd like to see being showcased next before beta or launch from Amazon Game Studios. I know it feels like there's still a lot that we don't know yet, so I can imagine there's a lot of different suggestions out there. Mine would certainly be more footage of the combat. And as always, thank you all very much for watching, and you have a good night or day. And farewell.